another quick tie. Your next fly starts here.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Quick Tie. My name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bover Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. We're excited to bring you this awesome pattern tonight. We have the Grumpy Frumpy Green Drake. This is a very unique fly. It's something in between an emerger and maybe a cripple. Nobody really knows, but it's a great style, great pattern, and we're excited to take you through that. We do want to give a shout out to Western Canada Fly Fishing Guide School for sponsoring this Quick Tie for you tonight. If you ever want some more information about the guide school, don't hesitate to head over to our website or reach out and ask us some questions about it. We'd love to share it with you. I'm going to be tying out of my Season 7 kit tonight. So it looks something like this. If you don't already have one of these bad boys, you can still head over to our website and purchase one today. Although we're reaching the end of the season, all of these videos are always logged on YouTube, so you can always come back, use the barcode, and come straight to each of these patterns that we're tying up every quick tie. If you're tying out of our individual kits, the materials are going to look the same. Little different packaging, but everything will look the same as what we're using here tonight. And if you don't have any of our kits, that's fine as well. All you got to do is head over to our website, and you're going to find that full fly recipe right there. And hopefully you got enough of the materials. You can go grab them and get through it that way as well. All right, let's take a look at the fly, what we're going to be working on. The Grumpy Frumpy, very interesting. It's got rubber legs halfway back down the body. We're using some foam, we're using some Zelon, Antron, and a little bit of hackle in there, a little bit of dubbing as well. Tie this in a variety of sizes. We're gonna be at about size 14, 12 to 14 for this next pattern, but you can go as big as the Green Drakes get in your local area or smaller. And the cool thing about this pattern is we are doing the Green Drake, but you could use this pattern for any mayfly that you may have on your system. It does work well as a cripple as well as it's kind of an emerger. What we do know is it works, so it's a good fly. Yeah, let's just get at it. Let's get through this fly pattern together. Go ahead and get that one out, and if you're tying along here, get your next hook into the vise. Make sure it's good and secure. For thread, what I'm going to be using on this one tonight, guys, I'm actually going to use two different threads simply because I do like to put a little hot spot at the back with some green thread, but it's not necessary. You could just tie with black or olive or something in that nature. I am using a 70 denier UTC, as it's something a little bit smaller, but you got to be careful with the foam that we're not actually cutting through the foam when we tie it in, as that sometimes happens with thinner thread. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start my thread just a little ways behind the eye. I'm gonna start working my thread back down the hook shank before I trim out that tag end. Once I get back here, I'm gonna take it a little further just before the point of the fly. We do need to portion off this fly into some segments, so we need to leave lots of room up near the head, as that's where the hackle is going to go in, and the actual body itself is only going to be roughly half of the hook shank. So we need to leave space. Don't forget about that as we move through this. We're going to go to our first chunk of Zelon or Antron, whatever you want. This is in black. Now I'm going to cut myself a strip about 1 inch long, so it's something to work with. And then we're actually gonna be taking some of this out. We do not want that big full clump. I'm gonna start by splitting it about in half. It should just separate away for you. And I kind of roll it back together as this kind of likes to separate. I'll set it out behind. I think I need to take still a little bit more. We don't need a ton here. This is kind of just like a trailing shuck and doesn't need to be super thick. Something in that nature looks just about right. So before I tie this in though, what I am gonna do, don't need to worry about cutting that off flat right now, as we are gonna trim it later, but I am gonna come back here and trim up here in front so I don't have too much material and I have a nice square edge to tie in. Now I'm gonna tie this in, like I said, right about at the point of the hook. So I'm gonna take a nice gathering wrap, get a second one in there, pull tight, do a couple more. I wanna make sure that it's right up on top. That's why I leave a little bit of length at the back, so that as I take this rearward, I am able to secure it right on top of the hook shank, and I'm going to take this right back to the bend of the hook, but just not over the back itself, just right to the top of it. And I'm going to come in here and trim out a little bit of this tag end. I also don't want to create a bunch of bulk too far up the hook shank. We'll get a bunch of that down, and then we'll just make sure we secure those butt ends with some thread. Now I'm going to bring it right back to about that point again, and we're going to tie in our foam. Just before we do that, let's just trim this off so it's out of our way as well. So we're gonna go about half a hook shank behind, roughly. Keep in mind that when you cut an Antron or a Zelon, it wants to retract, so you don't want it to retract too much. So if it's a little long right now, that's okay. We'll get a better idea of the overall length once the fly is completely put together. Now we're gonna head over to our foam. It's gonna be the next thing we're gonna tie in here. Now you're given a nice broad piece of foam here. All I've done is trim that down. And the reason I've trimmed that down is I want it to be roughly the hook gap in width. So if I come up here and check it, roughly hook gap in width is what I'm looking for. I don't want it to be too wide, otherwise it'll just encompass all of the dubbing we're gonna put in, and it'll kind of set the fly in a funny angle. So what I'm gonna do for tying is I'm just gonna come and just take a little nip off each corner. This gives me a little bit of a spot to tie in with. And now I'm gonna lay my foam. I'm gonna keep it on the near side of the fly towards myself, and my first wrap is gonna carry it forward up onto the top. So I take my first wrap, and just like that, it wants to carry it forward. I'm gonna start taking some kind of wide open wraps rearward, because I do want to capture as much as I can first before it wants to start spinning on me. And I'm gonna keep lifting this because I don't want to go too far past the bend. That looks good there for my very back one. Then I'm gonna start moving back up the foam. And now I'm compressing it as hard as I can. I want to get that nice and secure all the way back to where I left the back end of my thread, the back of the foam. Once I got that good and secure, this is just kind of what the fly is going to look like when I bring it up and over. So a big thing here is I want to make sure that it doesn't take that tail and point it straight down. So as long as you haven't taken your foam too far back, it should lay something like that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my superfine dry dubbing in olive, and I'm going to be covering up that foam with just enough to basically color the thread. We don't need to put a huge bulky body on this. So I'm going to take my thread right to the back is where I want to start it. I'm going to come in here, make a dubbing noodle. So again, I'm just taking my fingers and twisting in the same direction, not going back and forth, and that's going to allow that dubbing to grip. You can also use a little bit of wax if you like. Notice I don't tie with a lot of wax. I prefer to use moisture on my finger, like saliva or something else like that. But most of the time it's going to go on pretty easy. I might have a little bit too much. I've got about 2 inches here, but I'm going to start my wraps right at the back there, kind of working around that hook point the best that I can. And we're just looking for a fairly even underbody. And I'm going to take this forward to about the halfway point of the hook. I'm going to put just a little more dubbing right there, just a wisp, as that body kind of thinned out on me as I went forward. I want it to be nice and even. I'm going to put a little bit more on. It's nice and even. And this is where we talked about leaving lots of space up in the front half of the hook, because that's where all the rest of the stuff's going to go in. So this is where I'm going to leave it for now. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up and over, and we're basically going to finish off this foam right here. We're going to get it out of the way. So while pulling this over, keeping tension, I want you to take a wrap up and over top of your foam. I like to just use the weight of the bobbin to make sure that it's giving some tension, but I can make sure that my wrap on top is perfectly across the foam. Then I'll grab it back here, take a second wrap, and I'm using my fingers to make sure that that foam doesn't roll away from me. And I can secure it down. Take securing wraps forward on the foam, not rearward, as we don't want to take up any more space on that at the back end. And I'm going to come in here, trim out that foam. And now I'm just going to work my thread into it and compress that foam down the front half of the fly here. It's good. Okay, so on to our next material. We're going to go back to another one of the piece of that Zelon or Antron. This time we're going to go with gray. This is going to be part of the wing. Again, I'm going to grab myself a piece that's an inch or so in length. And again, I'm going to thin it out quite a bit. We don't need that big of amount. I'm going to start again by cutting it in half. And I think half is going to be about perfect on this one. We do want a decent wing out the front, and we are going to leave a little bit of one at the back here. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and get a thread wrap up over top, kind of right in front of that foam. And then I'm just going to continue some thread wraps forward, up over top, securing to all the way just behind the eye. And just make sure that the underbody, all of this is compressed and down. Just like that. Now I'm going to trim the back end first here. I'm going to just leave myself a short little bit of wing at the back. Not much at all, just a little stub like that. And then the front one, I'm not gonna trim it quite yet to actual length, as I'm gonna use my hackle to gauge how tall I want it to be, but I know I can cut it about in half, just so it's not in my way too much at the moment. Okay, now the next thing we're gonna be working with here is we're gonna go in and we're gonna grab our hackle. If I can find it, there it is. We got this nice grizzly, kind of chartreuse grizzly hackle. It's gonna look something like this. Now, this is gonna be where the most bulk comes in this fly. And we're actually gonna tie it in a little bit different than we normally tie in hackles, as I'm gonna actually tie it in up here at the front, and then I'm gonna work it to the back against the foam and then come back forward again. So we wanna put lots of hackle into this one. That's what's gonna give it lots of floatability. And kind of the deal with this fly is it's grumpy and frumpy. And the frumpy refers to, it doesn't have to look perfect. If it's a cripple, it's not gonna look good in the water anyways. So we're adding lots of different materials in here that are gonna basically make it look like a cripple, which means there's not a lot of good appearance to it, so don't worry about that part. I've cleared off a little bit of the stem. I've just tied in that stem on the near side of the hook. We're gonna tie it in up here at the front. Once I make sure I got that secure, I can get that little stem. If you can, get one thread wrap in front of the stem. Now you can see that little piece of stem sticking up. That's gonna help secure it even more. And then I'm actually just gonna come in here and trim that stem out. You just kind of got to work around that front wing a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this all the way back against the foam, because I've tied it in at the front, and then I'm going to work it all the way back forward again. So we're going to put lots of wraps in here. So don't worry about the first time forward if it doesn't look perfect, because we are going to come back around and add some more. So I'm just going to do some nice open spiraling as I head rearward, not trying to do super tight wraps like I said, as we are going to come back. Once I get to the very back, now I'm just gonna repeat what I just did. I'm gonna kind of wiggle that hackle as I move forward, so it fills in any spaces that I left when I started and came back. And once I get all the way up behind the eye, now I want to secure that off, and how I'm gonna do that is get a thread wrap behind it first. Very important that that first thread wrap is behind the hackle, and then take one in front. And then I'm gonna repeat that behind and then in front. And then try not to trap any little pieces of that hackle, but if you do, that's okay. We can always get them out of the way after. We're gonna go ahead and trim out that tag end that we have hanging there. Okay. And try again not to involve too many other pieces of hackle when you're trimming that. And from this point, we are gonna whip finish this right here, but hang tight because we're not done this fly yet. We do have some more materials to add. As you can see in your kit, there's still some rubber legs, and those are gonna go back in the body, but we're gonna come and retie in again to do that. So let's get a whip finish up here at the front. Work around, again, that hackle. Pull that tight, and then you can go ahead and trim out your thread. Just like so. We're gonna set that bobbin aside. And if you're gonna use that same color when you come back in, that's totally fine as well. Just set it aside for now. Now I'm gonna lift up on this wing, and when I cut it, I want it to be just slightly longer than the hackle. So I lift it up so I can see. Gonna trim it off just beyond that hackle. If you have any involvement of hackle that's too far forward, just go ahead and take a little trim, take a little second to get it out of there. But this is what we should be left with at the moment. Something that looks actually pretty darn good right now. But we're gonna fix that with adding some other materials in here. So now I'm actually chose to go with a fluorescent UTC in 70. Okay, it looks like this. This is just gonna add a bit of a hot spot for the next material which we're gonna tie in, which is simply gonna be a set of rubber legs, okay? Now this is a little more difficult because to whip finish again further back down the fly is gonna feel a little funny. But you're gonna bring your thread in and try to split that foam right in half. And we need to get a good thread wrap down. I'm gonna compress a bit here. Now really important is, because I don't wanna work my thread up or down, I'm just splitting this in half. Treat your tag end like it's a material. So I need to take a wrap around it. I'm actually gonna do it twice. And that's gonna secure that tag end so it's not gonna slip out on me when I let go. Okay. And try to keep that thread right in that little notch you've created. So now I'm gonna come in here, trim out the tag end, as it should be good and secure now. And this is what it's gonna have left us with on the underside. Now we're gonna go to our rubber legs. So these are actually silly legs. They're not like a true rubber leg, which works a little better on this smaller fly. Okay, green, barred black. What I want you to do is fold it right in half. And we don't need super long legs here, so you have these little pieces in your kit. I suggest is leaving it just like so. I fold it in half, and it's gonna be important why I leave this loop up here. It's gonna make our whip finish a little easier. So all I've done is I've found the midway point, and I'm gonna tie that in. You kind of got to work around the point of that hook as well. I'm going to do maybe 3 wraps on it to secure, and I should be left with something that looks like this. Okay. Now I'm going to separate those legs. I'm going to pull without cutting that loop. I'm going to pull one to one side, one to the other. Okay, like that. Now the reason why this makes it a little easier is then I can take that loop and just pop it back like that. If you see it there, it's out of the way. It makes my whip finish a little easier back here, but it is still a bit of a challenge. So let's come in here with our whip finish tool now. And I'm gonna try to stay right in that groove. We're not gonna go crazy on the whip finish as we are gonna add some resin, but do your best to try to work it in around those legs. Get a couple turns in at least if you can. Slide that off, get that knot good and tight, and then we'll put some resin on top to secure that. And then I'm gonna come down in here and trim out my tag end and set that aside. I can flip that leg back over like so. Now let's just trim out the center. It's gonna split those legs nicely for you. Now, my suggestion on length of legs here is I don't want my legs to extend beyond my Zelon or Antron at the back, and I don't want them to extend beyond it in the front. Okay, so I'm gonna trim these down a little bit, take about 1/4 of them off of each leg, and then I'll check it again and see if I like the length. What do these rubber legs represent? Nobody really knows on a fly like this, but it is an effective pattern as it was originally tied in this fashion. I'm gonna take a little bit more off again. I don't want it to be longer than the overall hook shank, so I'm trying to find that little bit of a middle ground. But leg length is always a personal preference on these flies. So you're gonna kind of find what feels comfortable for you. You'll be able to tell if it just looks too big or if it doesn't. I'm gonna leave those right there. I'm gonna go over to my Solarized Bone Dry. I'm gonna put just a little dab on that green thread where I whip finished, come in here, leave a little drop right there. Let that soak in a second. And I can cure that with my light. And then I am gonna put just a little bit of resin up at the head of the fly as well. This one's a little sneakier because you gotta get it in between those two materials, but I don't want to get any resin on that front wing. I don't want it to cause a change in the angle of it. There we go, we're gonna cure that. All right. Well guys, hopefully yours turned out looking something like this. This is the Grumpy Frumpy Green Drake. Really cool little pattern. It's gonna ride really high for you. One of the big advantages of the foam as well as so much hackle. Keep this one in your arsenal. Try it with some different mayflies as well. Maybe your brown drakes or your mahoganies, something like that. Vary the sizes, but I think you're gonna enjoy this pattern on the end of your line. All right. Well, this has been Tim Hepper with another quick tie here with Fly Fishing Bover Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. If you hit that little bell icon, anytime we have a new video come up, it's going to tell you, and you can just hop right on and watch. All right, guys, we'll see you again next week with another fly.